Our next speaker is Dr. Unni Krishnan Nair, who is the Medical Director and Senior Consultant, Vitreoretinal Retinal Services, Neuro-Ophthalmology, Electrodiagnosis from Sri Chitra Institute of Medical Sciences and Technology, Trivandrum, and of course, all his branches, and an individual of great standing. He is going to be talking to us on newer OCT markers in wet AMD. Look forward to your talk.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, thank you. So we've been talking about OCT biomarkers for an extremely long time. So I thought of just introducing a few new thoughts on it. So a biomarker, unfortunately, now is something we all take for granted. It's like a word association. So when you see HR, you think active, outer retinal ORT, you think dead, and subretinal fluid, you think good. So which is not exactly how it is now. So I'd like to concentrate on each of these three things, which are the biomarkers in material. First of all, the hyperreflective material. So defined as two. One is undefined, nice, and the other is well-defined. Based on location, you have subretinal, intraretinal, sub-RP. There are a few terminologies called RP splitting, enveloping. And the key point about HRM is that the persistence and a scar, and the ability to differentiate whether the scar is fibrotic or non-fibrotic. So we'll just start with what is SHRM, or subretinal hyperreflective material. When you see a grayish white material or a hyperreflective material in the subretinal space or in the intraretinal space in some cases, it is now termed as SHRM or HRM, which could be, it's a tomographic description, which means that clinically it could relate to blood, exudates, hemorrhage, fibrin. So we don't know what to do with this finding is a very key point that I'd like to stress here. So again, here above the RP, which obviously harbors some neovascular tissue, you see an elevated hyperreflective area, which is termed as SHRM. This is another one, and clearly see in the subretinal space, you see a very diffuse, ill-defined. This is what we call an undefined subretinal hyperreflective material. So we'll come to the importance of all these later. And here you can see different cuts in which you can see the nature of it. You cannot make out the borders clearly, and this is undefined. When you see the material in the sub-RP space that exclusively remove after treatment, you call it a sub-RP HRM, which is a kind of a variant of the hyperreflective material. So the key point is that well-defined SHRM is likely to be blood, and undefined is likely to be just exudation. Why is it important? Because you can use HRM as a diagnostic marker. Even before you have very obvious neovascularization, the signs of neovascularization, sometimes you get subtle subretinal hyperreflective exudation, which is an even more confusing term of SHE or she. So she is now in the absence of blood and is supposed to be possibly inflammatory and could be fibrin and overlies a CN wave even before the advent of obvious vascular features. Now, it's a diagnostic marker based on location. When the hyperreflective material is subretinal, it is most likely associated with a type 2 membrane. When it is intraretinal, you can always think of a type 3 membrane. But when it is sub-RPE, it is nearly always after anti-VEGF therapy. So based on the location of the hyperreflective material, you can make a diagnosis. As a monitoring tool, it's quite important. When you do not have hyperreflective material and you do not have SRF or IRF, it indicates an inactive membrane. The first reappearance of undefined HRF could be an indication of reactivation of a CN vein. So as a monitoring tool, the HRM could be quite important. Now as a prognostic marker. Undefined HRF or loose appearing, which we are saying it's fibrin or exudation, versus well-defined, the thicker membranes are likely to persist and go into fibrosis, cause damage to the photoreceptors. So as a prognostic tool, the thicker the membrane, the more hyperreflective it is, it's likely to be dangerous. So here you can a loose appearing membrane, over time it gets more and more organized and ends up in a very thick scar. And that's exactly what you see here, a very persistent SHRM. And which eventually becomes a scar, like you see over here. So as a prognostic indicator, there's a couple of new features that which is related to something called plasticity of the RP. The RP is a very versatile structure, it seems. It can undergo splitting, it can envelop the SHRM, and all show poor prognostic features that show that when this happens associated with HRM, it leads to a poor visual outcome. So here you see an so hyperreflective line enveloping the SHRM. Here is another case where you can see the sub-RPs splitting to encompass the SHRM. A key feature now using the OCTA to decide if the SHRM is vascular or avascular. Very simply put, a vascular SHRM is likely to become a fibrotic scar with a poor anti-VEGF response and poor visual outcomes. A quick word about ORTs. ORTs, or outer retinal tubules, is a protective mechanism of focal RP cells which curl around each other in an attempt to protect themselves. Yes, that's the simplest way you can say it. So there's a studies which define ORTs. But the funny thing about ORTs is ORT does not equate to death. This is a beautiful study which says that the size of the ORT increase and decrease with anti-VEGF therapy, and probably it has some muscular channels. So the concept in your mind, once you see an ORT, the tissue is dead, you do not need to treat, may not be exactly true. You may have to see whether the ORTs are bigger or smaller than the previous time, and whether they change with VEGF therapy. So this is a study which alluded to that. So it's interesting to see how the ORTs form, and that is what something like the plasticity of the RP. Here you can see with each stage, you can see a curve, then it scrolls inside, then it becomes like an envelope, it becomes an open ORT, and finally the last stage is a closed ORT. It's a beautiful paper that shows how the outer retinal tubules are formed. Coming to the last part of
1 minute left.
See, we started with the monthly treating where the aim was to dry the retina. Over time, we had studies that defined that there were more atrophic events when we totally dried the retina. And then the fluid study came, which was a very wrong, very, very what do you say, outcome that you read half the conclusion of a study and you take home a bad message. The bad message was that subretinal fluid is good. So let's be sure, subretinal fluid is not beneficial, maybe accepted. The key is that whether you can tolerate subretinal fluid. There is nothing called good fluid or beneficial fluid. That's the point about subretinal fluid. There is only something called a tolerable amount of fluid. So when you have subretinal fluid and you want to see, you have to define a new endpoint of treatment of anti-VEGF. And the endpoint can be based on the OCT fluctuations of fluid, can be based on OCTA, or it can be based on the atrophy increasing or decreasing. This is a small graphic, and you can see an active CNV with a good fluid. I'm just winding up in less than a minute. When the vessels become mature, fluid decreases and the RP flattens, and when you have a scar, you can have the absence of fluid. A new concept about this presence of fluid is recapitulation of surrogacy. What does it mean? The CNVM itself provides vasculature instead of impaired chorea capillaries, and it feeds the photoreceptors. That is, your CNVM or pathological tissue does the function of chorea capillaries. This is surrogacy. And you can see here, you can see a small membrane. Over time, it grows. There is no fluid, but this particular OCT membrane can do the function of chorea capillaries and supply the photoreceptors. So here again, you see different types of growing subretinal, that is quiescent subretinal CNVs, which do the function of chorea capillaries. Here you see the presence of fluid in the membrane. If you dry it, this is what could happen. Your eye could go into atrophy. So aggressively treating subretinal fluid may not be a great thing also. So the take-home message is that hyperreflective membranes, based on the location, the nature, and the changes with time, you can get a good idea as to whether a person is going to see a scarring. Outer retinal tubulations may not necessarily mean that photoreceptor damage is complete. There could be changes which could include persistent activity. And subretinal fluid could be a marker of a beneficial surrogate vascularity instead of a totally dead RP at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Srinivas?
Yes, madam. Uni sir, thank you for the wonderful talk. You brought out very important and valid points in a short time of 7 minutes. So regarding the treatment of ORT, outer retinal tubulations, most of us have studied the book of thoughts that it should not be treated. In what cases of ORT do you suggest all the general ophthalmologists, all the retinal surgeons here that we have to treat such kind of ORTs?
See, the diagnosis of ORT has, the main point is that we have to look at two particular points. One is that, is the ORT overlying an area in atrophy, or is the ORT overlying a scar? When it is overlying a scar, there is always a possibility of a vascularity still persisting. And nowadays, with an OCTA, you can actually evaluate whether the vascularity could be kind of beneficial or not. One. Two, there are studies and there are occasions where you have to see, and the ORT can change in size. And the current concept, especially for the daily film group, is that there could be a vascular channel inside these ORTs, which could be pulsating with anti-VEGF therapy. I mean, I'm not very sure that I've ever demonstrated a change in size of the ORT, but however, the concept that treating an ORT over a scar is different from ORT over a atrophy, I think is an important concept.
Is these foci, hyperreflective foci, indicative of faster progression or and greater geographic atrophy than compared to the other signs?
Hyperreflective foci, along with a lot of other finds, just basically indicate an RP disease in which the activated RP dissociates from the RP, travels anteriorly. So, along with vitelliform changes, vertical transmission defects, hyperreflective foci in dry AMD is a early sign of impending atrophy.
Quick comments can we have from the panelists?
One message I think which is very clear, and because the companies keep driving about the good fluid or bad fluid, to my thinking, and Unni has told very categorically, no fluid is good. All if it is not going does not mean that it's good. So it is tolerable fluid with some good visual acuity. So brolucimab or other drugs which are coming up with more drying effect and all should not necessarily, or aflibercept, they may say that this fluid is tolerable. Just because your drug cannot take care of the fluid does not mean that fluid is good. No?
I just wanted,
Absolutely, sir.
I wanted to ask Unni one question and give one comment. He mentioned, I've seen the ORT change over time in a patient of PCV. And second point I wanted to ask Unni, where do acquired vitelliform lesions in this new classification of biomarkers fit? Do they ought to be given that much importance? Does acquired vitelliform lesion as seen on OCT or otherwise clinically indicate faster progression to CNV?
Sir, I'm not sure whether it's CNVM. I mean, exactly CNVM. The presence of vitelliform has been associated a lot with the pseudodrusen, the RPD pseudodrusen, and presence of confluent drusen. So, and have been associated with increased atrophic events. The pseudo-vitelliform followed by resorption of these changes really associated with atrophic events. An early thing that has been described is something called drusen ooze. That is the breakage of the top of the drusen and the leakage of the drusenoid material into the subretinal space. We still do not know whether it is a continuum, whether it is a drusen ooze as a stage. We don't get and directly see the pseudo-vitelliform stage. But anyway, what actually happens is that the material absorbs, resorbs, and this material is not, consistent with a good RP health at that area, and it goes into atrophy.
So I'll just add a few quick comments. One is, excellent presentation, Unni, beautifully put out. Just about ORTs, first of all, I think they're dynamic. They can change, they morph. I demonstrated a case in one of the Rishi meetings where I showed, ORT coalescing over time and changing. Also, ORTs are not only to be found with AMD lesions, they're also seen in dystrophies and degenerations. So they're seen quite often in various other situations too. And about the question about fluid, of course, intraretinal fluid is known to be worse than subretinal fluid, can't be tolerated. Also, more patients lose vision, and I think we talked about this repeatedly, because people tend to tolerate fluid that they shouldn't. So more people lose vision because of our kind of tolerating fluid than not tolerating fluid. That said, CAT showed us very clearly that even with 12 months and 24 months of monthly injections, a significant percentage of patients were not fully dry. So that should be kept in mind, that even if you give somebody 24 injections, there is a possibility that some patients will have fluid. So you can't treat them to death. You have to keep that fact in the back of your mind too.
I'd just like to add a small point here. We tend to take the most juiciest points of an article. the points that like to stick to your mind. And that is where we got the point that fluid is good, fluid is good, fluid is good. But when you read all the articles, there's a fine print says fluid is good, but we do not know how good fluid is after 2 years. So all the studies go up to 24 months.
Yes.
Keeping SRF for more than 24 months has not been addressed by any of the studies that harp that fluid is good on yet. So yeah, this study is about 2 years old. So now if somebody asks you, you don't have an answer yet.
Right.
I missed it. We could have a debate on that itself in this session, whether fluid is good or bad for the
Yes,
subject.
that debate is also.
Have it in the next session. Thank you very much, Dr. Unni sir. I think he has really changed the way the conferences are being conducted in the imaging, especially, and this Retina Imaging Congress, I think, was the eye opener, and they have been successfully doing it. Congratulations to Dr. Unni and his whole entire team.